So 2012 ended actually a couple weeks ago, and I'm always late when I do these end of the year best of lists. But these are my top five films of 2012. And I actually think 2012 was a very, very good year compared to the last several. I've said before that I thought 2007 was a miraculous, amazing, interesting year of film where we could argue about all of the different movies, whether we liked them or whether we didn't. And the rest of them, or the rest of the years since then, have been sort of kind of commercial and kind of boring. This is a really good year. This is a year where a lot of famous directors that we've known over the years have either redeemed themselves from past films that they've done over the last several years, or it's been a year where film directors or writers have been able to say, no, we still got it, we're still great, and we're still on fire. So that was really, really great to see. And so now I'm just going to do my top five, but this is going to be going from five to one, as always, one being my favorite film of the year. And so let's start with number five. So my number five film is Zero Dark 30, and this is directed by Catherine Bigelow and written by Mark Boal. And I just reviewed this a few days ago, so it's still quite fresh in my mind. But I think the one thing that has really kind of, I guess, reverberated through the American consciousness so far is, I guess, the feeling of paranoia and grit and the immersive quality that I guess the direction and the writing has really evoked in this movie. It's very subtle, but the quality is definitely there. It's just maybe not on the surface, and it takes a while for you to really recognize it. But really, it's a film that captures all those feelings, those insecurities, and the thoughts of, where do we go from here, sort of thing, post 9/11. And very rarely is that done well without being maybe exploitive or maybe being manipulative in the way that it's trying to create the emotion, sort of like that movie, what was it, World Trade Center by Oliver Stone, which is just kind of, sorry to say, I thought it was kind of a hack job. But this movie really gets it, and it's mature. And I think the greatest gift we've been given as, modern moviegoers is this collaboration between Catherine Bigelow and Mark Boal. And I said this in my initial review, that these two have such chemistry. I mean, they've created this sort of journalistic, immediate filmmaking. I mean, because it's not a documentary, but Mark Boal was a investigative journalist. So his work matched with this kind of adrenaline infused action style that Catherine Bigelow has is so creative and so interesting. But a lot of people may ignore it because it's so clever and so subtle in the way that it's working so well. So like the writing is so good and so realistic that you forget that it's actually meant to be art. So I think that this film may be kind of tossed aside when it comes to Academy Awards season, but believe me, that does not take anything away from it. It is wonderful. I hope that these two stick together for years and years to come, because what they did with The Hurt Locker and this film is just really wonderful. So I know it's not out everywhere, but when it does come to theater near you, please go see it. All right, my number four film is Beasts of the Southern Wild. And I actually never reviewed this when it came out, and the reason is because I didn't see it until yesterday. I just rented it, and really, it blew me away. It is an astonishing piece of work. I mean, honestly, it almost brought me to tears. I was so moved by it. I thought it was so powerful, and believe me, that does not happen often. So you know you've created something special when something like that really happens to me. But really, I think this movie is just, it's a film about survival, obviously, and it does have a lot of apocalyptic overtones because the film did come out in 2012. So you do get a lot of the feelings of that it's the world is ending and that sort of thing. But it's a type of movie, rather than being kind of pessimistic about the world ending, this one is very hopeful about how the human race will be remembered and carried forward. And this film, I think what makes it so different and unique is how it really is very artistic in the way that it's put together. It does have a lot of kind of fantasy elements, mystical elements, interwoven through the plot, and also it's very metaphysical. The writing is really interesting as well. And I think the little girl, to me, is the best thing about this movie. I can't pronounce her name. I'm not even going to try. It starts with a Q, but the last name is Wallace. The main protagonist, the little girl, her name is Hush Puppy in the movie. I'll just call her that. But Hush Puppy is just, oh, she really is a revelation, this little girl. I mean, very rarely, even in actors that are older and mature, do you ever see this kind of quality, this maturity, in terms of just the facial expressions and the feeling. She unlike Les Miserables, she is there and she's really feeling everything genuinely. You know, she's not crying all the time and quivering and you know, looking into the camera and doing all this heavy breathing like they are in Les Miserables. I'm sorry I keep harping on Les Miserables, but that movie really pissed me off. I'm sorry, but it did. But you know, that movie, they're just really just quivering and they're crestfallen and all this sort of stuff. They're manipulating you into feeling something, whereas she is not contrived at all. She has this ferocity, this sternness, and this ability to seem very, very brave for her friends and for her father, and trying to stay strong in a world that is obviously crumbling. And I think this movie could be summed up in just the way, in just her facial expressions, her looks. But this is honestly, I think, one of the best performances of the year. Forget that she's a little girl. This is a very good performance. She's completely precocious, and I cannot wait to see what she does next. So definitely see this movie if you haven't. I'm sorry I caught on to it so late. So there you go. That's my number four. And on to number three. This is yet another film that has a lot to do with survival, but this is Life of Pi, directed by the magnificent Ang Lee, one of my favorite working directors today. And this movie is, you know, it's a lot like Beast of the Southern Wild in that it does have a lot of metaphysical elements to it, and it does have a lot of fantasy, mystical elements, like I mentioned that one did. But this one is the reason that it really touched me so much. I should say that a lot of people have been talking about who have seen it how visually stunning it is and how uplifting it is spiritually and emotionally. And they're absolutely right. This film is gorgeous to look at. It is some of the best 3D I've ever seen and all of that. It's definitely a spectacle. But what has really kind of stayed with me the most about this movie is how the is the story and how it's kind of mixed the metaphors of, you know, how allegory and truth can sort of affect each other or how they affect people. You know, the difference, and I mentioned this also in my review, a lot of this I'm repeating, but you know, the difference between realism and surrealism, how humanity has always been affected by storytelling and escapism, but that storytelling is always trying to say more through its metaphors and that sort of thing. But that's really what touched me so much about this movie, because to me, that's one theme that is always that I always see in movies and stories and things like that that really moves me. The way that movies can consciously tell you how a story is affecting the moviegoer and how stories are important to humanity, allegories in general. And so this movie is one that when I walked out of it, I honestly was speechless. I had to really sit there and think about it for a long, long time. And I cannot wait till it comes out because I'm definitely going to buy it. And it did not make much money in American theaters, and that really made me sad, but hopefully it'll catch on later on, and hopefully people will see it eventually, and I'm telling you to see it if you have not. So that is my number three. And my number two film of the year is The Master, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. This movie is very difficult to talk about, and it's had a lot of people definitely very split, and it's caused a lot of controversy. People don't really know what to think about it. Is it good or is it bad? Is it, you know, one of Paul Thomas Anderson's best, or is it a complete failure? And I have to say that I am a bit torn on it because I do recognize the flaws. I've been reading a lot about it, reading a lot of critics who have really sat there and analyzed it and listened to their opinions and then thought about my own. And I will agree, there are things about it that do not make sense. It is messy and things don't add up. A lot like There Will Be Blood. There Will Be Blood is not a flawless movie, but I don't really care. I think There Will Be Blood is it's one of my favorite movies of all time. And there's so many good things in it that I can ignore the things that are a little bit, I don't know, maybe not cohesive about it. And the same goes with this film. To me, what really struck me about this film and that has really stayed with me, not only are the ideas so strong, so bizarre, not only is Paul Thomas Anderson trying to get you to think on a level that you've never thought before, and he's creating a sort of artistic style, an auteur style that maybe you've never seen before, but I guess this to me is a brilliant character study. When I look at the character of Joaquin Phoenix and the character of the Master, both, Philip Seymour Hoffman, those two together, when they're on screen, is some of the best filmmaking I have seen in years. If it were just those scenes, that would be easily, to me, the best film of the year. It is amazing to listen to their very offbeat dialogue, their offbeat chemistry, the kind of bizarre quality of their relationship. It's very physical and almost musical in many ways, and you'll see what I mean when you see the movie. But it's a wonderful depiction of humans and how we latch onto things because we feel that we need some sort of belief to, I guess, a belief to believe in, redundant, sorry, but we need something like that in order to carry on. We feel like we have to latch on to something that makes sense, even though it could be completely false. We believe in things even though we may not know the whole story behind them. And, this is definitely true in uh, Joaquin Phoenix's character, but also in Philip Seymour Hoffman's character. He also needs he's a performance artist, basically. He needs people to believe in him. And without that, what is he? Now, the problem with this movie that a lot of people have said they don't agree with is the ending. How, these characters start in a certain area in their lives. They go on this long journey of, I guess, of self growth and that sort of thing. They have a character arc, but by the end of it, they kind of end on a neutral level. They end kind of on the same way they began. And, I kind of agree somewhat, but I disagree more to a bigger extent. I think that this film is very similar to There Will Be Blood. You look at Daniel Day Lewis's character in that film, and yes, he goes through a lot of different trials and tribulations. He grows as a person, definitely, but at the end of it, does he really make any great decisions? No, absolutely not. He kind of regresses, becomes the same person he may have been before. But I don't think that's a flaw. I think that's just a study of how humanity is. We may grow as people, but oftentimes we keep repeating ourselves and doing the same problematic things we've done in the past, even though we've grown. And I think that's really the point that Paul Thomas Anderson is trying to make. And again, it's a challenging film and it's meant to be a little bit weird and a little disturbing. And it's supposed to make you really think. And I think he certainly achieved. And even though this movie is flawed, I think it is one of the best films of the year easily. I just love Paul Thomas Anderson so much. So, yes, The Master is my second film.